You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. You should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. My proceeds from the PayPal acquisition were $180 million. I put $100 million in SpaceX, $70 million in Tesla, and $10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent. It is important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, i.e. the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves/details, or there is nothing for them to hang on to. It is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. I think it would be great to be born on Earth and die on Mars. Just hopefully not at the point of impact. I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The normal way we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. With analogy, we are doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it is like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and then reason up from there. Constantly seek criticism. A well-thought-out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. No, I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm trying to think about the future and not be sad. If you need inspiration, don't do it. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I would have to be on serious drugs. I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. I came to the conclusion that we should aspire to increase the scope and scale of human consciousness in order to better understand what questions to ask. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. Any product that needs a manual to work is broken. In terms of the internet, it's like humanity acquiring a collective nervous system. Whereas previously we were more like a question mark, like a collection of cells that communicated by diffusion. With the advent of the internet, it was suddenly like we got a nervous system. It's a hugely impactful thing. I take the position that I'm always to some degree wrong, and the aspiration is to be less wrong. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you figure out the question, then the answer is relatively easy. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better. One of the biggest mistakes we made was trying to automate things that are super easy for a person to do, but super hard for a robot to do. When I was a little kid, I was really scared of the dark. But then I came to understand, dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength, 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's really silly to be afraid of a lack of photons. Then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. I could go and buy one of the islands in the Bahamas and turn it into my personal fiefdom, but I am much more interested in trying to build and create a new company. They were building a Ferrari for every launch, when it was possible that a Honda Accord might do the trick. Every person in your company is a vector. Your progress is determined by the sum of all vectors. You need to live in a dome initially, but over time you could terraform Mars to look like Earth and eventually walk around outside without anything on. So it's a fixer-upper of a planet. It's pretty hard to get to another star system. Alpha Centauri is 4 light-years away, so if you go at 10% of the speed of light, it's going to take you 40 years, and that's assuming you can instantly reach that speed, which isn't going to be the case. You have to accelerate. You have to build up to 20 or 30% and then slow down, assuming you want to stay at Alpha Centauri and not go zipping past. It's just hard. With current lifespans, you need generational ships. You need antimatter drives, because that's the most mass efficient. It's doable, but it's super slow.